show up on your...
Okay, I'll get it then, if it's right in the agenda. We'd like to make a roll call for today's proceedings.
Let the record reflect that Chair Birch and board members Weigel and Goldschlag are absent, and the rest of the board members are present.
Thank you. I'd like to review approval of the minutes of the July 5th meeting. Any comments, thoughts? Hearing none, we'll proceed ahead to board business. And at this time, I don't believe there's any board business specifically. And as far as anyone in the audience wishing to speak on a public comment on an item unscheduled for this evening or this afternoon, hearing no one wish to speak on a public arena, thank you. Any statements of abstention tonight? Hearing that we are core, there's only 4 of us out of 7, we can't stand another abstention. So that being said, before we go on to our scheduled item, we have 2 items. I want to go through the review of why we're here. The project review is this review authority shall consider the location, design, site plan configuration, and overall, effect of the proposed project upon surrounding properties in the general city area. Review shall be conducted by comparing the proposed project to the general plan, any applicable specific plan, applicable zoning code standards, and requirements, consistency of the project with the city's design guidelines, architectural criteria for special areas, and other applicable city requirements. Therefore, city policy statements and development plans. So that is this board's review. With that, we can go to our first item, which is 6.1, our concept design review for recessed self-storage, and welcome staff to any report.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Hedgepeth and Design Review Board members. The project before you is actually a concept design review for recessed storage located at 4224 Highway 12, commonly referred to as Sonoma Highway. So the project description is they're proposing actually a 120 square foot, 4-story self-storage facility on the front of the project site, which is adjacent to Sonoma Highway. The tucked behind the project is two structures, multifamily residential structures with between 4 and 6 units per structure. One is adjacent to the creek and the other to some neighboring properties. And then one of those, or some of those units are also proposed to be designated as affordable units, which elevates this project to a higher priority status. The project also includes, the site is a potential site, a high potential site for a city well, for the city's emergency groundwater supply plan. And if you need any additional information on that, we have Jill Scott, the city's right-of-way agent, is here to answer those questions. So there are a lot of elements here that make this kind of a high priority project. Wanted to let you know. The entitlements that will be included in the project when it comes in is a pre-zoning application because the site is currently located in the county. It's one of 2 parcels. Both parcels will be included on that annexation. The use permit and the design review will only apply to this parcel. The conditional use permit is a minor conditional use permit, and the design review is major and will come before the board. The site is located in an area designated as retail and business services on the general plan land use diagram and is shown by the yellow star. The property is outlined in yellow above. This shows an aerial of the site and its relationship to properties around it. The Santa Rosa Creek is just to the south. There's another commercial site to the east of it, and residential uses and commercial uses along the western boundary, and then of course Highway 12, Sonoma Highway to the north. Here's a closer or a better view of the site now. The structures that are there will be demolished and replaced. And here's the site plan that gives you a better idea, and I apologize, I could have oriented it in the same way as the property so it would be a little clearer. But adjacent to Sonoma Avenue, or Sonoma Highway is the storage facility, and then the well site will be tucked behind that, where it's out of view from Highway 12. The two multifamily housing structures are outlined in blue, and I'm going to defer to the applicant team to give you some better descriptions of those. These are a couple of the elevations that were provided, or renderings, I should say, provided from the applicant. And then closer up, here's some renderings of the storage facility as it appears from Highway 12, coming from both the east and the west. And then some elevations or renderings of the homes, the residential structures. So the project site is not located within a priority development area. As such, it will come back to the design review board for preliminary design review. If at that time the board grants preliminary design review, the board will have the option, of course, to bring it back for final design review, grant final design review, or delegate final design review to staff. So the applicant is requesting at this point direction from the board. And that concludes my presentation, and I know that they would like to talk about their plans as well, so just give me a minute to get all this set up. Unless you have questions for me.
Any questions to staff this time? I had one about time frame. Then it's a county, so there's utilities meetings and a general time frame between county and city interface, because it's not currently in the city, but you have a mechanism by which the journey forward is not overly protracted, or what?
We do. Well, as you can imagine, it's in the county. LAFCO is very anxious to get these county islands out of the city. So we're doing a project review. We'll review for the pre-zoning, for the annexation, as well as the design review and the conditional use permit. Mm-hmm. And we'll take action on the pre-zoning. Then the process will transfer over to LAFCO. They'll act on the annexation. Once they act on the annexation, we'll be able to act on the design review and the conditional use permit. Those two entitlements will be ready to go at that point. And as far as time frame, because we haven't received project applications yet, we're all fingers crossed. It's got housing, it's got that well site, and we need storage facilities as well, hoping that it comes in quickly. But until the applications are in, I can't make a commitment. I know the LAFCO process takes a couple of months, 3 to 4 months, so.
And it's CEQA interface, because of its acreage size. It has it's under the 5. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and we don't know what level yet.
All right, thank you. All right, well, we welcome the applicant to come forward and make a presentation.
I can't get this.
You could state your name and address and citizenship. Thank you.
Due to some of the recent procedural changes, I've got to get something loaded, and I've got to get them this little handy clicker, so
they will stay in their current position. We no longer have rostrum presentations, is that true? Okay.
Correct.
We can still see you, thank you. I know they can't do it anymore.
Right.
Yeah, the harassment almost made it.
Staff presentation.
Thank you.
All right, while we're waiting for everything to load up, I will make an introduction. My name is Reed Hamilton. Can you guys hear me okay?
You might want to mic. Are we a little faint? Do you want to?
Let me see if I raise this baby up a little. Is that better?
Let's see.
All right.
There we are. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. My name is Reed Hamilton. I am the owner and developer of this project. I think Susie did a great job basically kind of giving everyone the 10,000-foot view of what we're looking at. At the end of the day, this is a project that's something that we're really proud of. We want to kind of go with the modern theme that you're looking for, or that you see here, really clean lines. But with that being said, I don't really have a ton to say about the project. Today, I'm really here to listen to what the board has to provide us and take that feedback and go back and try to design the project that's going to be kind of the most, I'd say, the best use for the area. So as I said, a project, something that we're very proud of and looking forward to do, and looking forward to some feedback. And I don't think.
All right, so it's more of a Q&A. Maybe we should all bring the graphics up so everyone can see again, and at least.
We'll see. You got it.
I think the board has the project plans up on your computers as an attachment to this.
Yeah.
We're having some difficulty because this is a PDF and it's not a PowerPoint, projecting it onto the screen. So I'm going to try and move some slides into mine, or some images, but for the time being, if you can reference, Reed, if you can.
Okay.
I don't think you're going to be able to.
Yeah, I can absolutely. And unfortunately, my computer crashed about an hour ago, so I'm going off of memory as well.
I had a little problem I'm downloaded fine on the next item, but I'm going to share with Sabra over here. But I think it might be interesting, even though you don't really want to comment too much about it, just the process. You have some nice fly-by-accident metrics in the site itself, but you may want to just briefly share what drove you to place the building where you did, and just the experience you had, and where you prioritized buildings, parking, and so forth.
Certainly. So kind of taking a step back, when we look at storage, we're really trying to change the way that the overall image of storage is looked at. And typically I say that is, most people think of storage as a chain link fence, a single building with not really the most attractive architectural features. So with this building, we decided to push it to the side of the property that we did, so we could get the square footage that we needed to make the project make sense, as well as at the same time being able to try to fit as many residential units on the property as possible. And so when we first identified Santa Rosa as an area that's in dire need of self-storage, and we have some metrics that we take a look at, and it's just simple numbers. It's 7 square feet per capita is, hey, anything below that, that's an area where people really need storage. And Santa Rosa, it's 0.8. in this area. I mean, what I'm getting at is it really, really needs self-storage. So hence the reason the size of the facility. And then working with Susie and Bill, we understood that, hey, the project, what the community actually needs besides just self-storage is housing, and to that end, potentially affordable housing. And so hence that's kind of the reason the project is laid out the way it is to try to maximize the size of the square footage as well as the unit count for the residential.
Okay. Well, what we could do, it's concept in nature, and we could start with any questions. We can do question comment. What do you think? Would you like to just start with more questions specifically, or do you want to combine questions with comment? We have creek setbacks here. We have our Highway 12 frontage, and I understand you've had a pre-app meeting,
Yeah.
haven't you, with fire and so forth? All right.
Correct. Yeah. Do you want me to come down there?
Yeah, you can come down now. That's fine. Yeah.
What I think we're going to do, Vice Chair Hedgepeth, members, is we're going to have the applicant walk through the plans that we can view on the laptop. Actually, we might be able to get it up on the screen here.
That would.
And then you can follow along with what you have on your graphics.
What's excellent is, we're going to minimize questions by having a deeper understanding. And everyone's safe in the room now. So hopefully by the end of your explanations, we'll have more comment than question. Thank you. No, that's great. We'll just continue that.
Perfect. Well, I'm a visual person as well, so this is helpful to have this up. Just quick background, I'm building about 7 or 8 of these throughout the West Coast right now from cities in Santa Cruz.
We need your microphone a little louder, please.
How's this?
Yeah.
All right. Good. So Santa Cruz, Salinas, Santa Rosa, Reno, Oregon, all over the place. And as I said at the start of this, we're really trying to make storage look more like a modern building or an office building. You can't really tell that it's quote unquote a storage facility. So what you see here is the storage building. Let's see, does this have a, look at that. So obviously the storage building here, and we try to have a little bit more of some modern accents. And then right now we're at 14 residential units ranging in size from about 1,000 square feet all the way up to, I believe this is our biggest one, just over 1,600 square feet. And that might change a little bit. We have Randy Figueredo, who's our residential architect, can jump in and comment on this at any time. And then, as Susie mentioned, this is a well pump, and I'll let Jill speak to this if it makes sense. But from what it's my understanding is a couple years ago, the city did some percolation tests for emergency wells throughout the area, and it just happened to be that our property is the #1 location. And in my mind, emergency well, that was, hey, that's where the fire trucks show up and fill up their hoses when there's a fire. Not the case. This is a well that would actually, the city would be run on for a couple of weeks. I think the max is it could run for 3 weeks a year. So it's kind of one of those things where timing might make sense. So the storage facility itself, I'll start there. Like I said, it's 124,000 square feet. I think we're about 900 storage units all said and done in there. And those are gonna range in size from 5x5s all the way up to 10x40s on the drive-ups. There'll be a couple elevator access, and what makes it great for a building like this in this area is it's essentially climate controlled, so the facility will stay somewhere between 55 and 80 degrees, depending on the time of year. Let's see. Just a little bit of a closer look. This would be views from Highway 12, and then obviously I guess these are all Highway 12 views. The first floor of the storage facility will be cinder block, and then the balance of the facility will be made out of metal, and it's pretty typical in the storage space. Everything's done with metal. We're looking at some buildings as concrete tilts, just because of where the tariffs are going on steel right now. It's a bit of a wild card for us, so we're trying to figure that one out. Residential units, once again, trying to come up with something somewhat modern but clean. As far as materials, Randy and I were speaking about this. I'm not 100% sure what we want to go with. Want to try to keep the two projects to look somewhat similar, but also different in the sense. And what's nice about having the residential with the storage is about one of the lowest traffic impact businesses there are, and especially after 6 o'clock. So hopefully we can provide the residential folks with as much parking as they need, and also a bit of a quiet buffer. I mean, and so we're hoping it's gonna work out really well for the residents as well as the storage folks. Just just another image here of the residential units, and I believe we've designed it to obviously meet all parking codes, but have garages as well as covered parking. And that is the end of this little slide we got here. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit better understanding of where we are and what we're thinking about doing. And obviously, timing is important to us, so we're trying to figure out the best way for us to be able to move through the project as quickly as possible. So any comments are greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's do this. Saber, let's start with you, and then we'll work back from Kevin to, so we'll work from that level right
Okay.
now to Scott. Go ahead.
I really want to commend you for a couple of things on this site plan. I appreciate the storage, although that's always going to be an issue. A four-story building is a four-story building. I really appreciate the fact that you plan to link to the adjacent residential neighborhood. And I appreciate that because I think it's vital to have multiple ways in and out. I'm curious why you decided on townhomes.
Compared to individual units, or I mean,
Compared to stacked housing.
well, to be honest, I'm not a residential developer, and I'm a self-storage developer, and I'm trying to figure out the highest and best use. And so if there's feedback on why you think we should do stack housing, I would certainly take that into consideration. I believe one of our issues that we had was the amount of space we have for parking.
And I can appreciate that. You don't have a lot of space, and you are doing your best to include both uses. There are positives from an affordability standpoint to doing stacked housing. There are positives from the point of view of how much land is being used for housing itself. So shrinking the footprint of the buildings is, in my view, always a positive. But I'm not talking about how much housing. I'm just wondering why you chose that configuration. Since one of the things that we would like would be affordable housing, and with the few number of units you have available, I theorize that the most you could give us would be one affordable unit given these. I was looking for ways to create more opportunity for affordability. And I don't mean affordability in the sense of subsidized housing, just
smaller units.
Smaller units or lower cost.
And that's something that we're very open to exploring. I actually spent the afternoon driving around today, meeting with property management companies, just trying to understand what's the need. And my general feel was, yikes, even though we've shrunk this down compared to where we started, we still might be a little bit too big on our unit size. And so that's something, if we couldn't figure out some concessions associated with parking, we would certainly consider more units.
I don't know where you are on a bus line, on a transit line, but it is a thing to look into.
Certainly.
Another thing that bothered me was the sheer size differential and the location of the housing. Put the housing as at best a minor note. And one of the reasons I thought about stacked housing was the ability to go up 3 or 4 stories so that your scale of the two uses was similar.
We were, and all that, it seems like Randy wants to jump in here. I think one of the reasons we kept the size a little bit smaller, at least to 2 stories on the west side, was because there's already existing residential. And we're certainly going to be close regardless what we do, but we're just trying to be aware of towering above the homes that are already there.
And I can appreciate that as well. I'm only thinking in terms of not creating an undesirable residential area for your potential residents. The final question I have actually relates to your sidewalk connections. I don't see a safe sidewalk connection from the residential units to Sonoma Avenue, to Highway 12. I see one where they have to cross the street by your structure, your four-story structure, but I don't see one that gets them through that area.
Through, just so I understand, through the parking lot?
Through the parking lot to the street.
Let's see. So,
I also don't see one that gets from the residential units onto the trail.
okay. We actually have a staircase from what's on the west side of this. Unfortunately, I'm pointing at the screen. Right here is a staircase that leads down to the trail.
Ah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabre. Kevin?
This is a question for Randy or for you, but how did you, first.
Go ahead and speak to the mic a little closer. Sorry.
First question is that location for the well the only location for the well?
The short answer is no. Bit of a long story. Working with Jill and the consultants, and Jill, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but the city has hired a well consultant, and they chose a couple locations on the property, and so we obviously it's critical for us that we create the design that we want, and we said, hey, here's a couple different options, and the location that it's at right now, they actually loved for multiple reasons, but one, because they can access the well via the trail for maintenance.
They is the city?
I'm sorry, they is the city, yes. Yep.
Were there other options that moved it somewhere else? That seems just like the kind of the prime real estate property for the housing.
It's actually not, Kevin. Reason being is there's about a 10 to 12 foot drop right there, slope-wise, and so once again, it slopes off quite greatly, and then it kind of buffers out a little bit, and so that's why the homes are kind of set up as a daylight basement. Yeah. I agree with you, though, because you want more homes back up against that creek. That makes all the sense in the world. But our other location was actually these first couple units right here, and right here. And after speaking with the city, and also I tend to agree that it's just not the most attractive thing to enter a project is a well house, no matter how much you decorate it.
And that would get units back towards the desirable location back there.
Yeah.
And then I had the same kind of question about the residential units, and if there's a possibility, and I understand you want to keep the scale down for the neighbors, but is there a possibility to step it up to one more level at least as you grow, and maybe grow in height towards the storage facility?
As I mentioned, I'm certainly open to it. The more units possible. The professionals might tell me I'm crazy, but you want to comment?
Hi, I'm Randy Figueredo. Yeah, we could certainly go higher. Right now, the building kind of in the southwest portion of the site, I mean, I had it as 2 stories because there's the houses that are behind it. They've got really deep yards, but they actually are, half of those homes are 3-story.
They are, yeah.
Yeah. And our homes up against the creek are actually 3-story. There's kind of...
The ones down here with the daylight basement, yeah.
Right, yeah. So the 2 lower floors are together in a townhome configuration with a garage, and then there's a unit above, so those are stacked. And these are really preliminary because, I mean, Reed has had this project in the works and gone through, the pre-app meeting and everything with the architect that's doing the mini storage. And I was just recently sort of brought in to kind of consult and eventually work into the design of the unit. So, these are really just kind of massing studies and the site plan. So the units aren't quite as far along as they normally would be for a concept design review, just because of the nature of kind of tag teaming and being brought into the project. So I mainly wanted to kind of get your feel for the site planning, the massing. Reed wants a, relatively modern look that we'd probably be looking with some kind of, hardy panel board and batten, maybe some metal on the, on the homes to kind of relate to the, the mini storage, so they wouldn't be sort of
Trying to keep
normal.
it somewhat industrial, but also homey, right?
It'd be a, Victorian craftsman, little front porch thing. I mean, they'll kind of have their own character that'll relate to what's going on the site eventually.
What other strategies are you using, particularly for the ones that are like directly across from the storage facility? The ones down by the creek, I think, are located great, and I'd like to see more down there, but that's the other question. What other strategies are you using there so that they're not just facing a, 4-story metal building?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to, get the rooms and the windows to look back more toward the south where the sun is anyway. And it's nice that the homes behind us have those really, really deep backyards. And then we'll have to work on that one landscaping strip. And it's kind of hard to shield the whole building. We'll just have to floor plan it around that and give them some focus on their own yards in the back.
I saw landscaping, there's like some trees to be planted there.
Yeah, I mean, there's yeah.
Site plan. Yeah. I think that's a very important piece.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, what's the, I assume there's elevators in the storage facility building? Where would those be at?
Yeah, there'll be 2 elevators in the facility. One, and I'm sorry you guys have to keep turning around, but one would be right up here closer to the entrance, and then the other main entrance is right here. So this would be the second. You'd walk through there, you'd walk in about 10 or 15 feet, there'll be an elevator, and then same over here. And yeah.
What the ideas for you mentioned the siding for the residences, but what are you thinking for the building? Like it's the metal?
Kind of a metal look, yeah, the industrial. And that's, like I said, that's just kind of how a lot of the storage facilities are built right now.
Yeah.
With a combination of some hardy as well. Yep.
So you want to make sure you consider how reflective that's going to be, right? For the houses across the way. That's all I have for now.
Thank you. Kevin Scott?
First question on the self-storage facility. Is it a branded facility, i.e. is the apple lime green like a color of a brand, or is that just to kind of pop the building?
Yeah, so it's a good question. That's something that might change depending on which equity partner comes in and also which management company. There's a chance that I'll go with a management company that's going to be blue, or one that might be kind of this green color. And this is one of the main management companies out there right now is called Extra Space. Sure. And they use a wasabi green. That's what they brand everything with. And so we kind of, it won't be called Recess, even though that's the only thing I was personally good at in school. And it probably won't be called Recess.
Right on.
Yep.
So that's in flux. All right, we'll leave the color alone until it becomes
final.
Going to move forward with.
Sure.
I think that the desire would be that there would be some color in the spots where it's shown. I think that it has some subtleties to it, yet defines it as a building, and you find place with it. And so, in speaking to the architecture of the storage building, I would say that. You've got great glazing, at the front of the storefront, obviously, and going up because you're going to showcase the units and that sort of thing is pretty typical. I would say the other corner probably needs some more either glazing or architectural features based on our four-sided architecture. I'm certainly not looking for the entire building to have, some crazy architecture going all the way around, but I think that those 2 front corners on Highway 12, you can see them as you pass by, and traffic almost backs up all the way to there, so you'd be sitting next to it.
Yeah.
And then go in the opposite direction, that's the main corner that you're gonna see. And then I would say going towards the creek side, I saw a couple recesses, it's a good nod towards some architecture back there. I'd probably look to explore some more, just going back, maybe 50 feet or so. And then I would echo Kevin's comments on the reflectability of the surface and just being mindful with Randy and the residential piece that, you know, they can play well together for livability. I agree with Kevin that I'd love to see some more units down at the creek side. My other comment would be, and I don't know who holds the entitlement authority regarding the parking, probably the planning commission, but you know, nobody parks their cars in garages anymore. It's all storage, and you've got a 120,000 square foot storage building right in proximity to all these houses, and so I'm wondering if you can eliminate the garage and create ADUs, or maybe it just becomes another bedroom for the unit or something creative in that nature, could definitely provide some more density for the housing element. And then I'm glad to see you've got connectivity to the trail. I would echo Saber's comment that connectivity to the access at Highway 12 would be important, and it would be great if they didn't have to jump over to the commercial side to then hit that walkway. If it could be separated behind the parking stalls there, that would be preferable. I think landscaping is going to be, again, critical in separating commercial from residential. And then it looks like, you know, there's a hint of landscaping out on the front, but that may also be another way to soften the large scale of the building itself without getting too crazy with architecture. I think those are my general comments. I mean, I really appreciate the creativity in melding commercial self-storage and residential on one parcel.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So what I understand first from staff is that where this is located in Santa Rosa, it's going to go through a preliminary design review beyond concept, and is that back in our court, or is that internalized?
That'll be coming back to the board.
Okay. Well, just I wanted to, again, thank the applicant for what is a need. And Highway 12, it's a scenic corridor. There are a lot of delicate things about how a building this massive can somehow be addressing the city. One of the things I reflect on, I'll talk about the residential side after the commercial side. The board did review a project, self-storage, about 5 years ago, maybe now 6 years ago, that was built in the area. Maybe there's some thoughts and reflection on reflection. The siding and the colors there's a lot of earth tone buildings, like the Mission Hardware, a la 1971, is more of a kind of a redwood building, and I know that those particular materials aren't high maintenance. But the whole way to address this building has about 3 times the frontage of the self-storage. And when you mentioned kindly that you like to have your buildings look a bit more like office buildings than mini storage with the glazing, the frontage, I'll just go back here. I don't think I have a laser.
Is that one? Is that what you're looking for there?
We don't have a laser. But if you go to the frontage on the top there, you can see that you have kind of like bookends. You have a charcoal shoulder to the corner. And I think it was Scott who mentioned about glazing. Then you have this corner, which, if you look at the pitch of the roof, the sign emblematically is inside that pitch. I think there's a potential consensus that the cocktail green is too much. Even when graphics are done on signs, the lettering can be a little hotter color, but the vast area in between the corners is rather unsung. And it's interesting that I think all of us embrace both agricultural roots and contemporary, but somehow the way to articulate that frontage, whether it's really trailing plants up 3 stories or 4, it's a 4-story building, but that's a sizable mass of building. And how none of us like fake windows. We don't want to see signs posted or boxes for sale behind a 2-foot deep wall. But how to mitigate that mass with a layering because there is an allowance, obviously, of moving the building forward. For instance, the Mission Hardware store is set back. It's got things in the front. But there's a question about, with color and particularly maybe even a steel frame or something that it would be a shadow layering. Think contemporary, think strong, think W130 per foot, that's a steel I-beams cage or something, but some way to create a sense of vigor, some vitality in a rather sleepy elevation there, if that seems clear enough. I don't know if I want Spider-Man to scale things and jump on the building and run around, but it would just be nice to climb vertically and to feel layered with that. It is west-facing. A lot of people see that I drive on Highway 12 every day, so I'm a participant in this. I do like the corner glass, the way you're layering the corner, and the pitch of that whole roof could be half the same pitch and give you signage. I mean, there's not a lot of volume up there, but that's, in general, my hope is that we can look carefully about how to scale that, and the trees will be part of it. If you can go back to the site plan a minute, there is the site plan is, right, you almost missed it there. The flat site plan. Let's go to the flat site plan a minute.
It's going to take a minute because
Okay,
that's not
I'm
on
sorry.
their slides.
I'm sorry. Well, there's a note of a 15-foot fire offset. Let's just use these for a minute. If we look at the top picture and you have the 4 roll-up doors, yeah, right in here. When Saber was mentioning about pedestrian connectivity, the idea that there are areas for fire trucks to stage and work the building, and that it's a building primarily, now and then in the daytime, you're going to have people loading and unloading. I don't think you allow people at 2 a.m. in the morning to work with sofas?
No.
Okay. Well, the question about some articulation of a sidewalk feature, or even if it's, how do we get a 6-year-old and 12-year-old to walk from the street back to where they live? It would be nice to be more than paint, whether it's cobbling, stone, or something. I wish the fire trucks could negotiate this area, since you have, in your dotted lines, you have a 2-way ingress-egress coming into the property, and you have a loop. You have your 5 stalls in the front. I'm not sure if we can do trees there. It would be nice to have at least 1 tree by stall 36. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to get in and out of those 4 doors with big wheel trucks. They want to crush and smash everything. But some sense of how the thread of that 5-foot walk could go back and not just be black asphalt. Could be something where you have a read as a 6th grader about you can walk here and not wander.
What are your thoughts on pervious pavers?
There are warm thoughts, happy thoughts of.
I know that we're going to need
20% of the project could be pervious pavers. Yeah.
Gotcha. Great.
Is that not true? Yes. Okay. So I understand that these buildings have to be very versatile. We don't want them to be phony. There's a lot of activity going on at the ground level. And thankfully you have trees in the front. We don't have a landscape party in our board anymore, but since your building essentially is going to be visually inescapable in the community, you could tree up that whole front middle section too. You could take coast live oaks or something. No one's going to miss your building if you looked at evergreens in that middle section just to soften the eye.
If the size of the trees that are there now that we're going to try to maintain are quite sizable.
Yeah.
And so that's one of it's not a real fair representation in this rendering here.
Yes.
But next time you go by, basically just to the east side of the glazing is an oak, as well as I think it's a pine. And so it's pretty substantial.
And I don't know if the city will make a comment. It's what's kind of fun about Highway 12 is its own little novel. It has oaks, it has maples. It's and I don't, maybe it doesn't necessarily need consistency, but maple trees get big, but something columnar that really says, I'm going to get to 60 feet without a lot of problem, something big there would, I think, really soften that building and help, not to mention some articulation. In general, I know that when people pull into Mission hardware to get fertilizer or bricks or whatever, they'll be seeing the side of this building and comment from Kevin and Scott about landscaping along there. You have room for that. I wanted to mention, with Randy, and thank you for attending as well on the residential. What's interesting is when you have 14 units and more, you typically have a manager. So if you have less than 14, you can just build units, and I don't know if that's a dialogue. What's interesting is because the creek is such an amenity, that's really kind of the activity area. That's the memory place for all the apartments. Some of the volumes that are made in the residential are actually 3-story sourcing already. You could almost put lofts, if you look at tying your large roofs together, the uninhabited space above that second level is not I'll use the word diminutive. There were comments from Kevin Scott and I think as well as Sabra that these carriage units, we see them from time to time, where you can actually stack a whole townhome on top of parking. You can do flats as well, but that's kind of a three-way stair, but since you're not a residential developer designer, I know, Randy, you know what I'm speaking of. You can actually take townhomes, stack them right on top of parking. The question before us is there's a humanity in the townhomes that you have at grade. You've got kitchen, dining, living rooms right at grade in between the apartments. So there is that virtue to having that humanity. The conversations around building housing stock in town and having garages at that lower level. Maybe I'm the only one that just mentioned that if there's buy-in or tolerance with having kitchen, living, dinings on the second level, bedrooms above that, and garages below, on the creek, because of the grades, you're gonna have ground level living. It's just that upper area. The rehearsals around how all these units are served and how many cars move in and out, I have an understanding that staff reports will be that the traffic's pretty minimal, and this is very different than a high-density housing project. But I just want to make mention that when you look at building mass, you look at the westerly units across from your building, I don't know how troublesome it would really be to the westerly neighbor to have 3-story because your ridge lines are already ambitious in their height. I don't really know from the board here. It's one of the first units we've seen, and it's a compliment that it is a commercial use with a residential component, and it's not slight. 11 units are nothing. It's you're doing this. So since you're asking for comment, the city's always hungry for units. You've got to manage the car count, and the conversations ahead. I don't know if anyone since this is a commentary more than any kind of closure, we'll be going to preliminary. The question about encouraging more units, but you having to be the steward of the project, at least what I'm hearing is smaller units, and if there's small units, could there be more of them? Is that generally what I'm hearing? Or is there it's more of a staff-born thing, but since you're kind of an open canvas here asking about units.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's all I'm saying. I'm trying to be Switzerland about this.
Fair enough.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you. Well, it is, knowing that we've had questions and in general comment, is there anything more any of the board members, knowing that we'll see this again, would like to express in, go ahead, Sabra.
I have one other comment, and I don't know if this is doable, but I'm I'm trying to envision it. I would really like there to be something at the street that would tell people there are residential units in some, form that isn't just move in here. I am concerned that turn at the storage unit building is just not the kind of address that people love. And you've got a great location. I would like people to be able to say turn at the something.
Okay.
So I'm not going to tell you what would be the marker, how you would best do it, but I think if there were something at the street that would be inviting, that would be good.
A salvaged historic water tank, is that what you're thinking? Sure. Yeah. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay. One quick last thing. I know you have a two-way in, two-way out loop with the fire department, and thinking about that sidewalk that would feed people back, delicately said, if it was a loop, I'm not mandating it be one way, but the drive area serving the residential units, we know we need at least 26-foot backup behind a garage, but exploring a sidewalk that would continue, remember your impervious pavers, stepstone, the potential of that tree island also having a partnering sidewalk that would queue and somehow keeping the backups and other traffic. You have to work out things with fire and understand that, but there's a consideration there that you could create a deeper thread yet for the pedestrian queuing by utilizing that island. I know we're feeding across backup areas in the building proper, but that's a thought. Okay. So with that, the city needs water. We need storage, and I'm sure there are 5 schemes, and this is the one that worked the best under emergency conditions. The city needs to operate with water, and if you flip the units to the whole front, I know the storage unit suffers, and it's just a very important thing to be thoughtful about the architecture of the storage unit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think as far as summarizing with concept comments, I know we're moving on, but do I really need to repeat things, or do you want, does staff have a general thread that we can go with?
I'd ask the applicant, I mean, I think it was pretty clear. If you have any follow-up questions, you can ask them now.
Yeah, I was taking notes, and I kind of heard the general theme, especially the similar themes through everybody, smaller, more units, obviously pedestrian right-of-ways where we can do it, impervious pavers, warm, I got that.
Different color.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, I think we have enough, so thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, we appreciate it, and have a safe trip.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Randy. So, thank you. So with that, I don't think anyone needs a break. We can go directly into the next item, unless staff needs a break. Okay. Oh God, I think I've got this one down. Thank you.
So should we all set up if Randy wants to?
Good afternoon, Design Review Board members. I'm Aaron Hollister, planning consultant with staff. Here this afternoon, we're looking at the concept design review for a small lot subdivision that's preliminarily known as Guerneville Road subdivision. It's at 1665 Guerneville Road. The project that you'll be reviewing today is a 12-unit small lot subdivision. 3 of the lots are proposed to contain accessory dwelling units. The structures within the development are proposed to be 2 to 3 stories, and there'll be a new private road for access down the center of the project site. We haven't done a complete entitlement analysis as of yet, but as of right now, we know the project is going to be requesting a rezoning from rural residential to multifamily residential. This is to allow the attached dwelling units as they're proposed at the density they're proposed. Conditional use permit and a tentative map would be required, and Planning Commission would be the entity reviewing those entitlements, and you would actually be reviewing this at preliminary design review as a major design review, as it's located outside a priority development area. The project's located in northwest Santa Rosa. It's just east of the Marlow Road corridor on Guerneville Road, about 900 feet east. The site's currently occupied by single family residents that would have to be demolished to accommodate the project. The rest of the site is vacant. I would note that just to the west, about 4 or 5 properties down, there's a somewhat similar development that was just recently constructed. General plan is medium density residential, which allows 8 to 18 units per acre. The project's proposing 12 units per acre. Here's the zoning, the R20 zoning, which is proposed to change to R3, 18. This is the conceptual site plan, and this is the result of comments from the pre-application, comments from the city, such as fire and building staff. I'll let the applicant get into this a little bit deeper. Here's a sample elevation that has been worked up for one of the 3-story buildings, and this is one that's proposed to have an ADU, and again, I'll have the applicant go through this a little bit further. And again, this afternoon, the applicant's requesting feedback from the design review board on the project as it's currently proposed. And I'm gonna wrap up my presentation for now unless you have questions. Thank you.
All right, questions to staff? I did have one question. In shifting from the rural residential to the R3 18, you can bring up the site planning. Again, I just had a question here. Typically, as you go to a rollover zone for attachment, I'm noticing the central, you have a fire lane turnout there in the middle of the private street, and you have the 2 units that appear detached. Do those have ADU units in them, or is this a hybrid where you're trying to create a zoning match to create the attachment for the 3 stories? But I'm just curious about my understanding is that with the 2 separate 2-story homes there that aren't coupled with anything else in the R3 zone, my understanding is that you need full attachment with all the doorbells.
Yes, that's correct. You'd have to do attached dwelling units in the R3, and I think the architect can speak to the layout as we received this kind of last minute site. So.
Thank you. All right, so hearing no questions, we can have a presentation by Randy Figueredo at this time. And I want to apologize, there doesn't seem to be anyone in the room wishing to have public comment at any time in this meeting or the last, but the proponent and the architect, so I'm safe in not calling public members to speak. Thanks. All right. Okay, thank you.
Hello again, Randy Figueredo. Gotta get some other architects in here. I'm starting to feel tired all the time. Let's see, page. There it is. So what we're looking at here is a property that's going to be rezoned. The applicant is looking to do essentially starter homes. It's off of Guerneville Road. It's adjacent, as Aaron mentioned, to another property that recently had a residential project built on a similarly scaled lot. Our access is off of Guerneville Road. And in terms of the site plan, kind of the first consideration on the site plan that happened was the fact that we were looking at, or I was looking at, having a double-loaded street for the efficiency of the units, because we're obviously trying to get to at least the midpoint of the density for the R318. The single loading, and this is about the 11th or 12th scheme we kind of put together for it, and the single loading is, as Warren knows, kind of what happens is to get the numbers up, you end up with these long, skinny units, and then you have a garage or a single car garage in front, and then you're kind of fighting to get windows into them, and they're sort of triplexes and fourplexes, and and I was trying to work away from that. I was trying to get them to be no more than, say, duets, so that the homes could all have plenty of windows, like to get two-car garages so they'd have two-car driveways, so we kind of put the parking to rest fairly easily. I like the idea of the kind of wide, shallow lots. And then we went through the pre-app meeting, got lots of good comments from the city. One of the things in the site design that kind of drove the design is the fact that the property is just a little over 120 feet wide. Yeah. And so what happens when you take the city standards of the kind of the rear yard depth, the public street width, the public sidewalks on each side, you just end up a little short. And so, we discussed that at the pre-app meeting, and then we had a follow-up meeting with the city and talked to Aaron and Bill Rose and Larry Lackey and Ian Hartage from Fire. And the city was very good about, working with us in terms of what potentially, we could adjust that wouldn't be exactly standards. We ended up looking at, at a private street, and with a private street that gave us, more flexibility. So we were looking at a private street with sidewalk on one side. Ian Hartage was open to a rolled curb, a mountable curb, so the fire truck could actually, get over on the sidewalk to make that width work. We're looking at getting the 3 stories, so the plates on the upper floor down below the 30 feet that requires the extra width for the fire truck for the aerial ladder access. So we're kind of squeezing every inch out of this guy. Bill, in a follow-up meeting, commented that he thought in our original schemes was 2 stories, and he thought, hey, well, we had some 2-story schemes and some 3-story schemes and some schemes with ADUs, and Bill thought and made a good suggestion that, well, maybe just for the variety of the street and to increase the number of units you're providing, you could do a mix of 2-story and 3-story, and having the 3-story would give you a little flexibility to perhaps work some ADUs into the project. So that's where we ended up, was with 12 units with 3 ADUs, primarily 2-car garages. Half the buildings are 3-story, half the buildings are 2-story, and hammerhead for fire with the private street. Actually, Warren's point I hadn't really thought of, that if we detach the units, we're probably not in compliance with the R318, which is easy enough to fix, because we'll just slide it and put them back together, and so that works well. So that was sort of the genesis of what we were trying to do there. And then in terms of elevations, this was sort of the initial concept sketch to bring before you, and I picked kind of the highest density of all the buildings, because like I said, half of them are 3-story and half of them are 2-story, and this is the 3-story that has the ADU. So the property line between the homes is right there between the 2 sets of 2-car garage doors. So on the left, you've got a 2-story home, or a 3-story home. It's all one home, so you'd sort of walk into an entryway and go up a set of stairs, and your living space would be on the 2nd level, and the bedrooms would be on the 3rd level. To the right, you've got the same type of entry where you're going up to the living level on the 2nd floor, bedrooms on the 3rd floor, and the lower right-hand corner where that additional kind of 3rd word porch is, that's the ADU. So the ADU is a single story that occupies pretty much most of what's to the right of those garage doors down there. And then the floors above are the main home. And these are all, you know, looking at being, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, other than the ADUs. ADUs are smaller, I forget, they're in the 600 square foot range, somewhere in there. So, materials, we're looking at a mix of probably a horizontal hardy lap and then a board and batten, some type of, panel with a batten on it, composition roofs, porches, gable brackets, again, trying to treat these more as much as possible as homes rather than, trying to have an apartment look to them, even though they're duets. And so that's kind of the main, the main items architecturally with the project that we were trying to achieve. And we'll have the bioretention will sort of be in the front yards. We're looking at, it'll be a small lot subdivision, so it'll have the small lot subdivision standards with the 10-foot, front yard setback where the porch is able to encroach, 6 feet into it and use some of the spaces between driveways for the bioretention and the trees that would be there. And we think it's,
Those aren't swimming pools?
No. We think it's a good mix for the neighborhood. The property to the east of this is the Quaker Meeting House, and so they essentially just have a kind of a big open parking lot next to us. To the west of us is, it's kind of a single-family residential, even though they don't have anything on the property line. Eventually, that whole area, seems like that whole area is going to be moving toward the R3 18, is sort of the city's intent for that really low-density portion of Guerneville Road.
If I could add just a few comments. Randy's recollection of our conversation was accurate. I've had the pleasure of working with this team at a pretty early stage, and so we've had some good discussions on options and what the city might want to see and what the applicant team might want to consider. And one of the ideas was to add some ADUs. So with R3 zoning, you do have a pretty flexible zoning standards, and so with 2 stories, doesn't necessarily take full advantage of that. So the thought was maybe get some ADUs in some of the units, but also with some 2-story units, you could still have sensitivity to the neighbors as well. And then with regard to the private street, it's there's still some discussion internally, mainly coming from our engineering department. So we will be continuing that conversation with the applicant team to see if that truly is something the city would recommend. I think from a planning perspective, I did have a conversation with the applicant team, and it looked like it offered the most flexibility for design. And the one item that did come up was with the private street, you would be taking away a dedicated planter strip. So the suggestion that I had was perhaps some of your SUSUMP features could be placed where a planter strip would otherwise go. And then that would offer some landscape relief in addition to serving for SUSUMP requirements as well. And then the other benefit to that would be that you'd have some private parcel deed restrictions for maintenance of that, so you could ensure that over the long term those features would be maintained.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. Historically, we started out anciently, I think it was about 1996. It was a whopping 4 units that could extricate themselves from a public street to joint maintenance agreement. It's pretty historic today, Bill, to hear that by having individual deed guidelines, or I'll use the word a handbook, that we're well above 4 now. There's other subdivisions that are, I don't know what the exact number is, but simply by looking on a unit by unit basis, if enough engineering can be built into each parcel to carry the maintenance on a durable level, and besides repairing a roof over the years, the residents participate in stewarding their lot, the whole joint maintenance agreement starts to fold into a more singular world of parcel by parcel.
So that was the proposal that the project engineer had presented, so it's something that, at least from planning, we're more than willing to discuss. I don't want to commit to that because it would come from our engineering department as well. So the point here is that we're more than willing to have that conversation, and if that's a viable path, we'd certainly pursue it in lieu of a formal planter strip.
Okay. Thank you. Well, a public street wouldn't work here. You would have pixie units in size of 46 foot right away. So, well, thank you for that. So there's no questions, which bring us back. Thank you for your presentation, Randy. Saber, why don't we start with you and your thoughts and aspirations?
Thoughts and aspirations, what a great set of terms. Clearly, to work with the R3 zoning, you'd move that stub street. I'm always happy to see stub streets, but I know how frequently they don't exist as a link to the next neighborhood. People begin to object to the idea that somebody from outside their 8 houses could drive down their street. And so they don't like the linkages. I think that they provide safe ways in and out of neighborhoods and allow the neighborhood to actually become larger and cohesive at the same time, safer for people to be on the side. But you might consider simply eliminating the stub street if you don't believe that you will ever be able to use it as a link to the newly developed parcel on the west side. But under all circumstances, you can move that to one side or the other and meet the requirements. I was confused about parking in this area because this is such a vehicle-dependent part of the city. And you are establishing ADUs. So where would those 3 cars park?
Themselves is 2.5 cars per home. And so the majority of them have 2-car garages and 2-car driveways, so they've got 4 parking spaces on the property. So if the ADUs... We
already know what garages are used for.
Yeah, well, I guess that's a different matter that I know my client has talked about, ways to write that into the ownership, agreements to try to keep people from doing that. But that's, that's the intent of the project, is to have 4 cars per lot for the majority of the lots, and then the ADUs are with the 4-car homes.
So will the ADU belong to the homeowner so that she or he or they can rent it out?
Yes, I believe that's the way it has to be in the city. Yep.
And because I know that we've been encouraging the creation of ADUs, is there additional access to financing if somebody is seeking to buy a unit with an ADU? Any clue?
Not that I'm aware of. I will say that currently, though, the way the ADU ordinance in Santa Rosa is written, owner occupancy is required. Unless that unit is an affordable unit, then you can rent out both of the units. But I'm not aware of any special financing associated with those.
Okay.
Because it's an ADU, a person who normally could not afford the unit.
We've made it a mouse maze for you.
I appreciate that.
Barry Freeland, project manager, long-term Santa Rosan, born here. If you have an ADU, the person buying the home with an ADU can apply the rent from the ADU to their mortgage qualification, and of course apply it to the actual payment, which actually reduces or increases their buying ability, in this case about $200,000.
I think that's excellent. I also appreciate the fact that this creates a more affordable, non-subsidized unit.
Yes.
I don't think the sketches I'm seeing are formed enough for me to have as much feedback for you as I'd like. I did question why the break between 2 stories plus garage and 2 stories plus garage was a 1-story. What I'm going to infer is a bathroom. I can't do anything else on the above the garage. It feels kind of orphaned there, and I just wasn't able to justify that in my own head, but that's a stylistic issue that you guys will need to work on. I would like to see the porches be a little more prominent. Porches help create a discussion with the street, and they help encourage people to know exactly where the entrances are and how accessible people are willing to be. The larger porch doesn't have to be wider, but deeper porch allows for porch furniture, allows for potted plants, allows for those amenities that make people feel like they live in a neighborhood.
Friendly, yes.
And those are primarily my concepts, but I'm certain that my colleagues who are architects will have more to say.
Thank you, Sabra. Kevin?
Thanks. Let's see. Is there a turnaround or a hammerhead required for fire?
Yeah, the little stub street is actually the hammerhead.
And so how does that work with the ones that are at the end of the street?
I'm not sure what the question is.
The truck goes all the way to the end and then backs up on the hammerhead.
I see.
It can go all the way out. Its hose can reach another 150 feet.
Is there a criteria for that?
It's a rule of 150 and 150. If your site's over 150 feet deep, you can have a hammerhead, but the truck basically goes 150 feet in.
Warren, if you could talk in the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
My pardons. I'm sorry. Okay. Typically, fire trucks, they have a rule of 150 feet that they can go into private property. They typically stop their engine at that time, and they can serve another 150 feet of hose before they can reverse gear all the way out. When it gets to be more than 150 feet, they don't like to reverse gear out. That's a lot of talent with a rearview mirror, so they want a hammerhead. There are exceptions where you can create fire hydrants here and there and do mods, but that's the typical go-to.
Yeah, so eventually when we bring it back, that hammerhead will be moving to the left, up to the north, and then those the 2 detached homes will be attached.
Back together?
Yeah.
Let's see. With respect to the porches and with respect to Sabra's comment, I would hate to see that the porches get deeper at the sacrifice of the rear yard, which is the only private outside space that they really have. So there's a dance there that you're making, and maybe there's a way to make them more prominent without making them deeper to satisfy the street view. I think the orientation is good. Obviously, the back side of the units, the back side of the garage is going to need some, we don't have an elevation of that, but that will need some architectural treatments and design to make that a desirable, so you're not just looking at the back end of anything, really. Obviously, we'll need some colors and things like that as it comes around, and I think that's going to become very important based on the elevations. There's some change in materials in there. There's a lot of the same material as well, so I think that's going to be important as it goes forward. That's it.
Thank you, Kevin. Scott?
So I'll start out by saying that I was kind of a fan of the project before I heard the backdrop, and now that I heard all the creativity that has gone into it, both from staff and architecture and client, I really appreciate where it's ended up. I think along the lines of architecture, the other piece to pay attention to, which I'm sure you're going to, is the two-story units that the sidewall faces Gurnville Road. So that's obviously going to be the most prominent view from the public eye. Also, maybe the back corners, I'm not quite sure, but I'd just say take a look at that and make that as handsome as possible. And the only question I really had out of everything was the island in Gurnville Road. Is that diagrammatically placed there in that location because it exists, or okay, so it exists already?
It exists.
Okay, yeah. All right. It's kind of just it looks like it's a funky way that people might actually try and pull the left-hand turn into that area and bypassing the island, but so just thoughts there from a safety perspective.
Yeah, it's a discussion we've been having with engineering of kind of how that's all going to work, because it's there right now. And
good. I really like on the site plan the delineation of the two garages with plantings. I think, obviously if that can stay, I think that is a great nod to kind of breaking up the homes themselves. So I really like that. From an architecture perspective, I agree. You can, you're going to break up the look of the houses. I obviously understand that, and so I would just say, I don't have any problem with the architecture as it currently stands or the materials you're using. I just would say try and steer away from the gingerbread. Some of the elements of the porch elements in the porch support or the awning supports are a little bit gingerbready. Overall, look forward to seeing this project built.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, I wanted to compliment both staff and the applicant. I think this is a great example of the city and the applicant working together, and the whole idea of massing, looking at three-story buildings, not being timid, but strategically placing 2 stories to soften. It's a great example of that, so thank you for that. I know this site's plan was no small task. It typically is the greatest journey. There's working drawings as well, but the site plan's a lot of work here, and I think the idea of just being able to couple those lone buildings so that you have the R3 compliance, it speaks, it's interesting with fire department access. These R3 parcels benefit in that you don't necessarily have to have row houses going on forever. There needs to be access to rear yards for fire. And whatever the neighbors say, I think this is a great way to look at scale and relief together because these buildings are coupleted. I don't mind at all the 3-story building, the little shoulder in between the two on the elevation. In some ways, buildings that jump out of the ground 3-story need a little relief here and there, and I don't mind the second level ridge element coming down to kind of happily give relief to things. The whole porch conversation, I'm respectful of the rear yard situation. It's also becoming a staff narrative. How do we get 400 square feet or setbacks? And there are other projects that obviously have this at bay. But I like the 15-foot rear yards as well. It'd be a shame to make those too small. One thing is that the porches, as far as the verticality, they're all at the same gutter line level. there could be a playfulness. I understand that the ADU unit on your 3-story, you have a more strong kind of an elephant leg porch for the main residence, and the interior porch closest to the garage is your ADU porch, as I understand it. But I guess what I'm looking at is all the porches look the same. If there's some playfulness to some of the heights, maybe a level, a spandrel level or something above, so that maybe some of them grow a little taller, would be kind of wonderful. I think in general, it's been said before, we need to have four-sided architecture when articulate the backs, the fronts, mix up the colors. Very well said about not having an orphaned Guerneville Road elevation, that there'll be glazing there on those 2-story levels of generosity. Would that be the right word? And I think in general, the comments about the private street, I don't think it's inappropriate for me to say that the new zoning administrator, Andy Gustafson, there's a lot of conversations, warm ones, about how streets are used in the future. They used to be, before cars, they were used by people and horses and all kinds of things, and then we had cars. But I think Sabre had a kind comment about how this private street is actually going to be populated because of its narrowness. It's going to have memories on it that you wouldn't find as much. Would that be another way of saying this? Because of its narrowness, the mortality of children might be extended. And my comments about the stub road, the Hammerhead, we're not sure what the next neighbor is, but they would, in my humble opinion, it's probably going to exacerbate things. If you take a private street in a tender neighborhood like this with individual maintenance agreements, spilling more traffic into it in the future from another project is probably, whether the city wants that, that's fine, but now you're dealing with private street to private street, and they would have to in turn have some level of discipline to steward themselves. So that's just a future, that's kind of a chess game comment. So with that, I think we've overall, staff, do you feel content enough with what we've said? Is there enough clarity?
Quite content.
Yes, thank you.
I just, if the applicants have any questions, would you like a summary? Did you get all of the comments?
All right. No, I think I have all the comments, and I appreciate the input.
Absolutely appreciate the input, especially that regarding the porches.
Yes.
I mean, it really is going to make a warmer subdivision where kind of a community as opposed to more of a community, less of a street. And I like that. That's important to me.
Thank you, Barry and Jerry and staff. This is the way things can roll in the future. And with that, I believe we're down to the rest of the agenda items, which is any board business. I do want to compliment the city for gaining, thank you, applicants. I want to compliment the city for being awarded a national grant for art of $350,000. So I know it's not quite related, we no longer have an assimilation with the art in public places, but the idea that you can leverage our disaster with art is a curious feature. So, but that money won't be spent on housing projects. That will go into some other form. But that's just an editorial. And with that, Kevin has to coach baseball, and Sabre has to help her, whatever. We have all kinds of things we need to do.
It's my anniversary.
It's your anniversary today. Congratulations to you.
Yeah, we're still married to each other.
So it's the anniversary of the board and your husband. Is it 46 years now with your husband?
Not quite.
Not quite? Okay. All right.
And I have no department reports other than
department
congratulations to you, Sabra.
Yes.
And that's it for tonight.
Thank you as well. It's great that we have 7 people because we can still have these should there be too many vacations. So this stack is didn't fit the database of entry. It was 700 megabytes, and so are we getting this in a non-digital form because it didn't fit through the cyberspace? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Well, with that, we can adjourn our meeting.